Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT how to play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play Katarina Assassin for patch 11.23. We're back with the second how to play for 11.23 since it's an extended patch. Katarina Assassin is one of the strongest builds in the current meta despite being nerfed a few days after the patch came out. We'll be taking a look at core champions, traits, items, as well as an overview of which augments to look for. To end, we'll cover the general game flow for each stage of the game. With all that said, let's go ahead and get started. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details of how to play Katarina, let's first ask the question of when to play Katarina. Technically, this composition is forceable every game. Since it relies mostly on low-cost units, particularly Katarina, it's okay if others are contesting. That said, if multiple players are contesting Katarina, then the power spike of hitting Cat 3 is going to come a lot later, excluding extremely high roll situations. So a better way to look at when to play Katarina is to go based on how Stage 1 went. While yes, you want to ideally be making as much gold as possible even in Stage 1, if you don't have a great opener for the composition and you scout and someone else does, well, maybe you should consider not playing it. The reroll compositions are notorious for hand-holding, so if you're the type of player that says, me cat no pivot, then by all means go for it. As for a good opener, main indicators are a lot of early gold and finding a few units you want later on, specifically Katarina. The 1/4 augment can also be a tell as to whether or not Katarina is worth pursuing, but we'll talk more about augments later on. It's also worth noting that if you have a strong opening board, the playing the win streak is as viable as an option as lose streaking. It's just not ideal for Katarina, meaning the composition may be off the board. Overall, forcing Katarina is certainly viable, but be willing to play other comps if your stage 1 and 2 aren't favoring playing Katarina. And make sure to scout. Even if it's playable when contested, ideally it's best when only one or no other players are contesting. Now we can get into the actual how to play for Katarina, beginning with the core champions and traits. We'll keep this simple because the composition itself is quite basic. Katarina 3 is the main carry, then all you need in addition to her is Talon, Echo, Shaco, Leona, and Blitzcrank. That's 4 Assassin, 2 Academy, and 2 Bodyguard. Simple and easy to remember. There can be some variation in the 4th Assassin, as Shaco is replaceable by both Twitch and Akali, but for the most part, the 6 units remain the same every game. The majority of the mid-game and part of the late game is likely to be spent re-rolling for 3-star champions. Order of importance starts with Katarina, Talon, Blitzcrank, Echo, and finally Leona. But honestly, all that really matters is Cat 3, and everything else is just bonus points if you happen to 3-star them. Avoid holding too many champions on your bench as you want to be efficient with your gold to hit Cat 3 as quickly as possible. Past level 6, the options open up to really anything. If you have an emblem or heart for assassin, then you want to add in a 6 assassin at level 7. Otherwise, look for socialite, additional frontline like Braum, or defensive stats like enchanter. Generally speaking, this board is rarely going to make it to level 9 or even 8, so you don't have to plan too far ahead. But as we said, it's a super simple comp as most reroll builds tend to be. Next, let's go over the core items. Katarina is the main carry, so make sure you're focusing heavily on obtaining the best items for her. Whether you're open forting or not, the chances anyone playing Katarina is likely to be low enough on health to be first or second pick on each carousel. This helps a lot on finding exactly what items you need because Katarina is a diva and needs perfect items. The 3 items that are best in slot for Katarina are Infinity Edge, Ionic Spark, and either Gunblade or Hand of Justice. Gunblade is overall better, but it depends on augments. Hand of Justice is perfectly fine as a 3rd item, so don't fret too much if you're unable to secure Gunblade. Of the 3 items, Infinity Edge is technically the hardest to secure as it uses both the sword and glove, so prioritize those components early on if possible. The rest of the composition tends to use whatever items you can get, but Talon does well as a secondary carry. The 2 best items for Talon will be RFC and Infinity Edge. This gives him room to deal damage without melee pathing being an issue and adds a big old chunk of damage to his bleed. Beyond that, any utility or defensive items are just fine to use. There's something particularly pressing to get as long as you secure the items for Katarina. The last type of item to mention are emblems, with an assassin emblem being the best of the best for this composition. If you manage to snag one, give it to Blitzcrank. Then you can either add in 6 assassin or replace the 4th assassin with Blitzcrank to add in other synergies if needed. At the end of the day, the only items that truly matter are Katarina's, so always prioritize them first. The final piece of the puzzle before we break down each stage are the augments for Katarina Assassin. In general, the best augments are anything that gives you gold early game, more efficient rolls, items, and various buffs that synergize well with Katarina. Try to avoid anything that outright wins you rounds early game, since the general goal is to lose streak, so options like Built Different aren't ideal since those types of augments are for win streaking. Let's go over each augment stage starting on 1-4. There's a few options here, but as we mentioned, gold is one of the best. Windfall is by far the largest injection of gold available and jumpstarts your path to hitting 50 gold. Rich Get Richer isn't quite as much gold, but is still very nice. Then there's more specific gold gain augments like Calculated Loss and Hyper Roll. Both of those augments go well with an open fort style. More efficient rolling is also a good path to go down with options like Trade Sector and Golden Ticket. They don't play as much of a role early on, but having them later is certainly useful. As for non-gold or roll-related augments on 1-4, one of the best is actually the Metabolic Accelerator augment. That's because you'll lose quite a bit of health in Stage 2 with open forting. Gaining 2 health back per round and on the PvE round, where you won't lose any health at all, is super useful for scaling into the late game. Let's move on to the 3-3 augment, which all of the previous augments can be okay options, but not all of them are ideal. Calculated Loss, for example, is much weaker in Stage 3 because you want to start winning at that point of the game. Metabolic also becomes less useful simply because there aren't as many rounds left in the game, but gaining health per round is never a bad thing. Instead, look for any augment that boosts the strength of your board since you want to begin winning by round 3-3. Item grab bag and other item-related options are nice here, such as Pandora's items for rerolling components you don't want, or salvage bin for the extra item. Even ancient archives can be useful since you may end up with an assassin emblem. Speaking of, assassin emblem or heart is a decent option on 3-3, though it's not likely you'll be able to use it for 6 assassin until later on. Other assassin-related augments that can be good are Cutthroat and Smoke Bomb. Neither are amazing, but they are direct buffs to your board. And finally, let's talk about round 4-4, where the main goal will be buffs to your board. Emblems, items, and passive bonuses like Exile or Celestial Blessing. High Roller is also quite good at any point in the game, but it's especially nice on 4-4 and low roll games when you're just not hitting any upgrades. Gold is less needed at this point in the game unless you're struggling to hit, but experience augments can be a great way to level up quickly. Things like Level Up or Wise Spending can help boost you to the next level or new recruit to artificially boost your board size. Later game augments can be quite hit or miss, but there's a decent amount of options. The main idea behind augments for Katarina is not to overcomplicate it. Anything that gives you efficiency in gold, rolling, or board strength is the simplest way to play around augments. We've covered the champions, traits, items, and augments. Let's move on now to a brief look at how to play each stage of the game, beginning with the early game. On the opening carousel, the goal should be any component you need to make Katarina items with an emphasis on sword and glove for Infinity Edge. It should be easy enough in general to get an item for Katarina, but if you absolutely cannot, try to get a bow for Talon instead. For Stage 1 and Stage 2, the goal is to open fort. How much you actually want to open fort is up to you and how comfortable you are at doing it as a player. Open forting basically means playing an extremely weak board to intentionally lose rounds with, or simply finding no champions at all. In Stage 1, this can be done with a few specific 1-cost champions, but we recommend not risking it and just playing any 1-costs. In Stage 2, you need to be scouting diligently to see if anyone else is open forting or looking to play Katarina. This doesn't necessarily change what you're doing, but having information is important. If someone else is open forting but not fully, then it may be a good idea to have 0 champions on the board to ensure that you lose the round. That concept is key for Stage 2 because you need to lose all 5 rounds in Stage 2 to maximize your gold gain and have first pick on the carousel. Yes, playing from a win streak is doable, but requires a bit more luck with component drops, and while saving health can benefit you later, the easiest way to play a Katarina board is to open fort and lose until Krugs. From there, we can move into the mid-game where you want to hit 50 gold, level to 6, and roll. Slow roll each round looking for the 6 core champions while holding onto excess Katarinas and Talons. Be sure to scout and get an idea of anyone contesting, who else is playing a reroll board, and the general strength of the lobby. Ideally, you want to begin winning midway through Stage 3, or at least by the end of it. Stage 4 is where you definitely want to be hitting your 3-star Katarina and Talon. Cat is far more important, so focus on her, but having both 3-starred is the key to win streaking in Stage 4 and 5. If you haven't hit by the end of Stage 4, then you will need to begin rolling below 50 gold. Once you're into Stage 5 in the late game, you need to have hit Cat 3, Talon 3, and the rest of your board 2-starred. If not, you're going to struggle against a lot of other boards and may end up bottom 4ing. That's okay though, because this composition is fairly high variance, as is any reroll composition. Sometimes you just don't hit. Be sure to roll down to 0 if you're in Stage 5, still haven't hit Katarina 3, and are getting really low on health. It's better to have no economy to level up with after hitting Katarina 3 than to be sitting on a Cat 2 and losing every round. Overall, the main power spike of this composition will be in Stage 3 and 4, which should propel you into the late game where positioning comes into play to win your rounds. Don't expect to win every game with Katarina Assassin, as it's not that strong of a composition in the late game. Aim first to get in the top 4 and then finish either 3rd or 2nd. Winning is certainly possible, but won't always be obtainable, so having realistic goals like 3rd or 2nd is better for climbing ranked. And that's it for today's video, folks. Katarina Assassin is one of the best, if not the best, compositions for climbing ranked right now before patch 11.24 next week. Keep in mind that the most dominant reroll builds get gutted, so if you want to gain LP, then we recommend playing this composition now before it's too late. And if you're struggling to do well with the composition, we recommend watching streams of high ELO players to learn from. Let us know in the comments section below which composition you'd like us to cover in our next How to Play video. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.